Have you ever said something in anger that you immediately regretted? A single moment of rage, a few uncontrolled words, and suddenly a relationship becomes damaged, peace disappears, and guilt quietly settles in the heart. Paramahansa Yogananda often warned that anger is one of the most destructive forces inside the human mind. Not because anger itself is evil, but because when it controls us, it disconnects us from our higher consciousness. In those moments, we stop acting from wisdom and start reacting from wounded emotion. The tragedy is that many people believe anger is impossible to control. They say, "That's just my nature." But Yogananda taught something very different. He said anger is not your nature. Peace is your true nature. Anger is simply a disturbance passing through the mind, and like any disturbance, it can be calmed with the right awareness and spiritual discipline. According to Yogananda, anger does not appear suddenly out of nowhere. It begins quietly as a small wave of irritation inside the mind. Someone says something we don't like. Something doesn't go according to our expectations. The ego feels challenged. At first it is only a small reaction, but if we allow our thoughts to feed it, the wave becomes a storm. Within seconds the mind becomes heated, the breath becomes fast, and the body prepares for conflict. Yogananda explained that this process happens so quickly that most people never notice the early stages. They only realize what happened after the damage is done. That is why the first step to controlling anger is awareness. You must learn to recognize the first spark before it becomes a wildfire. Yogananda often emphasized the deep connection between the mind and the breath. When the mind becomes restless, the breath becomes restless. When the breath becomes calm, the mind begins to calm as well. This simple truth becomes a powerful technique for controlling anger. The moment you feel irritation beginning to rise, pause and become aware of your breathing. Instead of reacting immediately, take a slow, deep breath. Hold it gently for a moment, and then release it slowly. This small pause creates space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, wisdom has a chance to appear. Many people believe controlling anger means suppressing it, but Yogananda warned that suppression is not the solution. Suppressed anger does not disappear. It hides in the subconscious mind and eventually emerges again, often with greater intensity. True mastery over anger comes not from pushing the emotion away but from transforming the energy behind it. Anger contains tremendous energy. When directed outward, it becomes destructive. But when guided inward with awareness, that same energy can become clarity, strength, and self-control. Yogananda taught that much of our anger comes from attachment to our expectations. We unconsciously believe the world should behave according to our desires. People should speak to us a certain way. Situations should unfold the way we planned. When reality does not match our expectations, the ego feels threatened and anger arises. But spiritual wisdom invites us to see life differently. Instead of demanding that the world behave according to our preferences, we begin to accept that life is constantly changing and unfolding beyond our control. This shift in perspective does not make a person passive or weak. In fact, it makes them incredibly strong. When someone insults you or behaves unfairly, anger may seem like the natural response. But Yogananda encouraged his students to ask a deeper question. Why should another person's behavior control your inner peace? If your peace can be destroyed by someone else's words, then your happiness depends entirely on external circumstances. Spiritual freedom begins when your inner state is no longer controlled by the actions of others. Another powerful insight Yogananda shared is that anger often reflects unresolved pain within the mind. When we carry old wounds, criticism feels more painful. When our ego is fragile, disagreement feels like an attack. The anger we feel toward others is sometimes a reaction to insecurities we have not yet faced within ourselves. This is why self-understanding plays a critical role in emotional mastery. The more deeply you understand your own mind, the less power anger has over you. Meditation, according to Yogananda, is one of the most effective tools for transforming anger. During meditation, the restless waves of thought gradually become quiet. As the mind settles, we begin to observe our emotions rather than being controlled by them. Over time, this practice strengthens the inner witness, the part of consciousness that can watch emotions arise without immediately reacting. When anger appears, instead of becoming the anger, you begin to see it as an energy moving through your awareness. Yogananda often described the mind as a lake. When the lake is disturbed by wind, the surface becomes turbulent and unclear. But when the wind stops, the water becomes calm and reflective. In the same way, when anger agitates the mind, our judgment becomes distorted. We say things we do not truly mean. We make decisions we later regret. But when the mind becomes calm through meditation and self-awareness, clarity naturally returns. Another practical technique Yogananda recommended was changing your mental focus during moments of anger. Instead of repeatedly thinking about what someone did wrong, shift your attention to something uplifting. Recall a peaceful memory. Repeat a calming affirmation. Silently repeat the name of God or a sacred mantra. This simple shift interrupts the cycle of negative thoughts that fuel anger. Over time, these small practices begin to reshape the mind. Instead of reacting instantly, you develop the ability to pause, observe, and choose your response consciously. The mind becomes less reactive and more stable. Situations that once triggered intense anger begin to lose their power. Perhaps the most beautiful insight Yogananda shared about anger is that compassion dissolves it naturally. When you truly understand that every person is struggling with their own fears, ignorance, and emotional pain, it becomes easier to respond with patience instead of rage. The person who hurt you may be acting from their own confusion. Recognizing this does not justify harmful behavior, but it allows you to respond with wisdom instead of emotional retaliation. As this awareness deepens, anger gradually loses its hold over the mind. What once felt uncontrollable becomes manageable. The emotional storms that used to dominate your reactions begin to pass more quickly. And slowly, almost quietly, you begin to discover that the peace Yogananda spoke about was never something you had to create. It was already within you, waiting for the mind to become still enough to reveal it. Part 2 Liko. And once a person begins to discover that inner peace, something remarkable starts to happen. The situations that once triggered explosive anger slowly lose their power. The same words that once felt like attacks begin to appear less threatening. This transformation does not happen because the world suddenly becomes kinder or more fair. It happens because the center of control shifts from the outside world to the inside consciousness. According to Paramahansa Yogananda, the real victory in life is not winning arguments or defeating others, but mastering the restless reactions of our own mind. Yogananda often reminded his students that anger is a habit of energy. The mind becomes conditioned to react in certain ways through repetition. If someone reacts with anger again and again, the brain begins to follow that pattern automatically. Over time it becomes almost mechanical. A person may even begin to believe they have no choice in the matter. But spiritual awareness reveals that every habit of the mind can be changed. Just as anger was learned, calmness can also be learned. One powerful practice Yogananda suggested is developing what he called the sacred pause. When you feel anger rising, do not speak immediately. Do not react instantly. Simply pause. In that brief silence, observe what is happening within you. Notice how the body feels tense, how the breath becomes faster, how the thoughts begin to race. By observing these sensations without acting on them, you begin to separate yourself from the emotion. Instead of becoming the anger, you become the witness of it. This witnessing awareness is one of the greatest spiritual powers a human being can develop. When awareness grows strong enough, emotions no longer control the mind automatically. They appear, they are noticed, and they pass. Yogananda explained that this ability is strengthened every time we choose calmness instead of reaction. Each moment of restraint builds a new pattern in the mind. Another technique Yogananda recommended is silently asking a simple question during moments of anger. Will this matter tomorrow? Most of the things that provoke anger in daily life are temporary situations. A rude comment, a misunderstanding, a minor inconvenience. But in the heat of the moment, the ego treats these events as if they are extremely important. When you pause and ask whether the situation will matter in the future, the mind often begins to regain perspective. Yogananda also spoke about the importance of protecting your inner energy. Anger drains enormous amounts of mental and emotional strength. After an angry outburst, people often feel exhausted, restless, and mentally disturbed. That is because anger scatters the life force throughout the nervous system. Spiritual discipline teaches us to conserve this energy rather than waste it through emotional reactions. One way to preserve inner energy is through regular meditation. When meditation becomes a daily habit, the mind gradually develops stability. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, meditation strengthens the nervous system and emotional balance. Over time, situations that once provoked anger begin to appear less significant because the mind has learned to remain centered. Yogananda also encouraged cultivating compassion as an antidote to anger. When someone behaves harshly or unfairly, it is easy to react with hostility. But if we look deeper, we often discover that people act negatively because they themselves are suffering. Someone who is filled with fear, frustration, or insecurity may express that inner turmoil through anger or criticism toward others. Recognizing this truth changes our perspective. Instead of seeing the other person as an enemy, we begin to see them as someone struggling with their own inner conflict. This awareness does not mean accepting harmful behavior or allowing others to mistreat us. Rather, it allows us to respond with calmness and clarity instead of reacting blindly. Another practical method Yogananda taught was the use of positive affirmations. The mind is constantly influenced by the thoughts we repeat. If a person repeatedly thinks thoughts of resentment or irritation, those emotions grow stronger. But if the mind is trained to repeat peaceful affirmations, the emotional tone of the mind gradually changes. For example, during moments of irritation, you can silently repeat a calming affirmation such as, "I am a peaceful soul. Nothing can disturb my inner balance." These words may seem simple, but when repeated with sincerity and concentration, they influence the subconscious mind. Over time, they help replace reactive patterns with calmer responses. Yogananda also reminded his students that true strength is revealed through self-control. Many people believe expressing anger shows power, but in reality, uncontrolled anger is a sign of inner weakness. Anyone can lose control and shout in frustration. But it takes real discipline and awareness to remain calm when emotions are provoked. This form of inner mastery is one of the greatest achievements on the spiritual path. When you learn to control anger, you begin to notice changes in every area of life. Relationships become more harmonious. Communication becomes clearer. The mind becomes more creative and focused. Most importantly, a deep sense of dignity begins to develop within your consciousness. Gradually, you start to experience a new kind of freedom. Situations that once controlled your emotional state no longer have that power. You realize that your peace does not depend on whether others behave perfectly. Your peace comes from the stability of your own awareness. As this awareness grows stronger, the mind begins to reflect the deeper qualities of the soul: patience, compassion, and understanding. Even when challenges arise, you feel less shaken. Instead of reacting with anger, you respond with clarity and thoughtful action. This transformation does not require perfection. Everyone experiences moments of irritation or frustration. The difference is that a spiritually aware person recognizes those emotions quickly and returns to calmness more easily. Each experience becomes an opportunity to practice awareness and strengthen self-control. Eventually, something beautiful begins to happen. The same situations that once caused anger start to become teachers. They reveal where patience is still needed, where ego still reacts, and where greater understanding can grow. In this way, even difficult experiences become part of the process of spiritual evolution. And as you continue practicing these teachings, you gradually realize that controlling anger is not just about managing emotions. It is about discovering a deeper identity beyond the restless reactions of the mind. It is about remembering that beneath every passing emotion there exists a calm, steady presence that cannot be disturbed. When that presence becomes the center of your life, anger loses its authority over you. In its place, a quiet strength begins to guide your words, your actions, and your relationships. And in that quiet strength, the timeless wisdom taught by Paramahansa Yogananda begins to reveal its true meaning, that real peace is not something we must search for in the world, but something we awaken within ourselves.